Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. I am on my own today, and today I want to speak about the importance of having a vision, a clear vision for your healing, and not just the importance, but the absolute necessity of that. So, I first want to talk about this concept in the universe of duality or polarity. Now, listen, I'm not the first person to bring this up, right? Spiritual teachers have been teaching about this for millennia. And part of the illusion that we live in is that everything is polarized into good or bad, happy and sad, support and challenge, pain and pleasure. And this is a function of what we call our lower mind. So imagine your mind consists of two different parts. One part is your lower mind. It's not a good or bad, it just is. So your lower mind is the part of your mind that is conscious and unconscious, and that makes up a part of your ego. And the lower mind polarizes things into good or bad. And it does that because its job is to keep us safe. Survival is the biggest human drive, right? And so in order for us to develop our consciousness, we have to be alive. And so being alive really matters. And separating things into, is this going to be conducive? Is this safe for me? Or is this unsafe for me? Helps us to stay alive. And that's a function of the lower mind. So the lower mind creates this map of reality about how we are, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about the world, and what we believe about other people. And that helps us to navigate our way through the world safely. And this also, as I said, that map of reality, when it polarizes information that comes in through our senses into whether this is going to keep us safe or whether this is going to be detrimental to us. And so we then create ideas of good and bad for ourselves, right? What's supportive to me? What's challenging to me? What is helpful to me? What's not helpful to me? And so it would appear as if things are either one way or the other. And so black and white thinking leads to fundamentalism. And we all know that fundamentalism leads to massive conflict in the world. I mean, we have so many examples of that, right? And so what we are heading for is, instead of this fundamental part of our mind, we want to connect to the more holistic part of our mind, which is our higher mind. Now, when I say we want to connect to it, we want them both to be working equally. Because if they're both working equally, then the lower mind becomes the faithful servant of the higher mind, because the lower mind helps us to take action. It's also where the seat of our will lies. So it's not like one is good and the other's bad, right? What I'm trying to convey is that we need both. And in order for healing to happen, we definitely need to be connecting to both equally, or at least at the same time. So I'm going to clarify that. So at the level of the lower mind, everything is divided into good and bad, depending on what we like and what we don't like, depending on what we associate with safety and what we associate with danger. At the level of the higher mind, think of this as your all-wise knowing mind, or your spirit. Things are neutral. There are no likes or dislikes. There's no polarity. Support and challenge is equal. Now, every time I start off with this explanation, my ego, and this says, oh, someone's going to challenge you about something really hectic and say, well, how is rape? How can that be a balance of support and challenge? Or child trafficking, right? So honestly, if you're new to this concept, I would urge you to start practicing this with simple things in your life before you start moving to the really complex concepts. So I don't actually know exactly how gravity works, but I do know that gravity keeps me earthbound. And it's the same with this. The more I practice what I do know, the more I practice seeing both sides and looking at situations as being neutral rather than polarized from one to the other, what happens is my nervous system stabilizes. I become calm, I become clear, and then what is true for me to do in my next step becomes more obvious for me. And so that's how I use it to create what I would love. And that's how I would urge you to use it to create the healing that you are loving to create for yourself. So we've got these two minds, right? We can either operate from the level of our polarized mind or our lower mind, all right? And this contributes to the part of us that is conditioned. Or we can operate from our higher, more intuitive, more holistic, more integrated mind. Now, here's the issue. By default, because survival is the most important thing, by default, our focus is unconsciously on our lower mind. And our lower mind consists of our conscious thinking mind as well as all the unconscious things that are running us, right? So by default, that's where our focus lies. So we have to train ourselves to shift our focus onto the vision that we may have for our healing from our higher mind perspective. Now, focus creates reality. So we all know this. If you have something that you are longing to bring into the world, something that you want to create, the more you focus on it, the less you're distracted from it, the more single-minded your focus is, the more likely you are to actually create it. So think of an athlete that's going for a gold medal at an Olympics. I mean, those guys are focused, right? Those athletes, they train, they stick to very strict training schedules, regimens, resting schedules, food schedules. They've got different kinds of coaches that do all sorts of things because they have single-minded focus, because they know that there's only one person at that particular Olympic Games in that event that can win that gold medal, right? So our focus creates our reality. There's no controversy there. But the problem is that your focus by default is on keeping you alive. So it is by default on your fears and your doubts and your limitations and your, everything that you've suppressed, conscious and unconscious. So we need to learn how to shift our focus, right? Okay, so that's the first thing, that our focus creates our reality, which means that whenever we are faced with any situation in our life, so you've just received a diagnosis of a disease, you're always going to have 2 points of view of that disease. One is going to be your lower mind's point of view, which is the one that we all can totally relate to. What does this mean for me? What is the prognosis? What is the outcome? What is the treatment you're going to use? How much fear does this evoke in you? Are you going to die? Are you frightened of that? The doctor or the healer, whoever you're working with, if they are operating from their lower mind, then they're going to reinforce that for you, right? And so it's all going to be about the facts. So in our current medical paradigm, it's about the facts. This is the diagnosis. These are your treatment options. This is your prognosis. This is what we need to do, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It only becomes a problem when that's all that we stick to, right? So at the same time, your higher mind that sees it as all-inclusive has a different picture. So your lower mind goes, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's going to be painful. It's going to be ugly. I'm going to lose all my dignity. This is absolutely awful. Your higher mind is, well, we've all got to die. And this can be used as a tool for healing, and it can be more integrative. Now, that sounds very bypassy. I know that, all right? But just bear with me for a second here, okay? So you've always got these 2 points of view. And depending on which one you are focusing on is going to determine what outcome you're going to get. Right? So the point of view of your conditioned self or your lower mind is your current reality, and it's important that you can get real with that, because it anchors you in the present and it motivates you to change it. It's important that if you are just thinking positively and you're all love and lighting and you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore it and I'm just going to do my positive visualizations every day and I'm not going to think about any of the reality and da-da-da-da. Okay, well, then you are not actually anchoring your reality in the present. And that decreases your ability to create what you'd love. In this instance, the healing, right? Okay. When you connect to the vision for your healing, you create an anchor in the future that helps to pull you into the future. So your current reality helps to motivate you and propel you out of your present, and your future vision helps to pull you into the future so that your current reality can start meeting your vision. And that's how healing happens. Now, it sounds very simple, and it is actually, but it's not easy. And it's not easy for a number of reasons, which I'm going to enumerate now. Now, what very often happens is so your ego, this is the problem, your lower mind, ego, your conditioned self, is going to tell you that you don't know what the vision is for your healing, because you don't know how to do this, and you don't know how to access your intuition because you've never done this, and you're in trouble, and you don't have enough time to learn, you don't have enough time to uncover and sort out all your ego stuff, all your years, decades of suppression, and changing your personality and like changing your coping strategies. Your ego is going to catastrophize this and tell you don't have enough time. And honestly, if you have a disease that has a time-limited prognosis, you probably do have a more limited time, but it depends on your belief system. But, let's just assume you've got 6 months. which is why it's imperative that you don't fall into the egoic trap that you can only connect to your spirit vision, your higher mind vision for your healing, once you've sorted out all this lower mind stuff. You don't have to have sorted it out. You have to start cultivating an awareness of it. At the same time, you can connect to the vision that you have for your healing. And when you've got those two, you're set to start creating changes in how you see the world, how you see yourself, and the actions that you start taking. So I'm going to give you an example of this. I have a client, she's a client of mine now, but she wasn't a client of mine then. She was referred to me by a colleague of mine, a homeopath. And this lady had had cancer before, and I forget now, she'd had breast cancer, but I think she would have been in remission for about 12 years. It was a long time. And she'd had a different cancer recurred in the same place. So same breast, different type of cancer. And she was conflicted as to, and she was quite into complementary medicine and those sort of alternative healing stuff. And she was really conflicted about taking the chemo, but the cancer was stage 3. It was already in her lymph nodes. And so her doctor said to her that she really needs to do the chemo. And so she was conflicted. And so my colleague and friend said to me, do you think you could help this lady? I said, well, I don't know. I think I can. I've never done this with someone on like consultation number 1, but I do believe that everyone can connect to their vision. So what we did was, it was quite a lengthy thing, right? It took like an hour and a half, and it was experimental. And I did tell her that it was experimental. But basically, I took her through the process, a process of uncovering what was actually like the most pertinent thing that was going on relative to why she had gotten sick, and sort of what her unconscious. And the most pertinent thing is what your limiting beliefs are. What's your limiting beliefs and the patterns that are driving you, right? So we did that. And then I took her through a creative visualization to get her into a sort of a blank slate state of mind where she wasn't so trapped in her thoughts and feelings. And then I took her through a process where we connected her to her vision for her healing. And then we did another process to actually find out what the truth was of what healing modality she needed to access most urgently. And you know what came up? Chemo. So the reason why I mention that is because I am the alternative bunny, right? But I also know that everyone is their own healer and that everyone can access this information for themselves with the right guidance. So anyway, the client started doing the chemo and she chose to do the coaching. And so since then, she's been connecting to her vision. She's been working on all this unconscious stuff that's been running her. She's been having insights because her intuition has started firing, and she is now on her healing journey. So the beauty of this is that when you can do this, there doesn't have to be one size fits all healing. When you can do this, the healing becomes self-directed. It doesn't mean you're on your own and you've got to do it all alone. It means that you learn how to connect to the truth of what is true for you right now. The truth is that particular client was leaning in the direction of, I don't want to do the chemo. But when she connected to the truth of her spirit, the answer was chemo. She was like, okay, well, that's what I've got to do. So she did the chemo. Okay. So it's not about the chemo, not the chemo. This is about, are you taking an action from the directive of your higher self that's not operating from fear, that's operating from that place of what would you love in this life? Or are you operating from the fear and doubt part of your mind? So those two parts of the mind are really, really important. And the ego is going to tell you that you have to fix all that childhood trauma. You've got to do all the shadow work. You've got to do the reparenting. You've got to heal the inner child. And yes, you've got to do all that, but you don't have to do all of that in one go. And you don't have to do all of that before you can connect to your spirit. You can learn to connect to your spirit at the same time. And the reason why this is so vital is because I want you to think of, okay, so I'm going to give you an analogy, and I'm hoping that when you see it this way, you'll realize why this is so important. So if you've got a 12-volt battery, right? 12-volt battery, which is one of those batteries that run our cars, okay? It has 6 cells. Each cell is worth 2 volts. 3 cells are positive and 3 cells are negative. They're equal and opposite. There are not more positive cells than negative cells. There are not more efficient positive cells than negative cells. There are 3 negative cells and 3 positive cells. They're not 5 positive cells and 1 negative cell. 3 and 3, equal and opposite. So if you want to light a light bulb using that battery, you have to, obviously connect some cables to the terminals of the light bulb. And then you've got to connect those cables to the positive and the negative terminal of the battery at the same time. And when you do that, the light bulb comes on. So that's how creation works. We need both terminals of the battery for the light bulb to come on. So when you only want to focus on the positive and the love and light, and you don't want to face the reality of your situation, and the reality of your situation is that your habits, the way that you think, the things that you haven't felt, the way that you haven't maybe processed your information, the unconscious things that have been driving you, those limiting beliefs, where your focus has been, doesn't mean it's your fault, but all of that has contributed to where you are today, sitting with your diagnosis. And unless you're prepared to start looking at that, cultivating an awareness of it so that you can make different decisions, you're going to keep on creating the same thing. So you can't bypass that negative part, but you also can't bypass the positive cells. And that means connecting from the beginning to what is it that you would love to create? Because without that, you don't have tension. And in order to create, we need to create tension. The tension between the reality, I have a diagnosis of cancer, and the vision, I would love to, I have a mission and a purpose that I want to fulfill in this life. And listen, this doesn't mean noble. The mission and purpose can be, I want to live to 120 and enjoy life to the fullest and drink the wine and eat the food and like have all the experiences, right? So you need your current reality and you need the vision. And what that does is it sets up a gap, and that gap is tension. And that tension is what helps us to create. So when we do this, we have two types of tension because polarity exists, right? We have creative tension, like, oh yes, that vision is amazing, and that is what I'm going to create, right? That is what I'm after. And at the same time, it also sets up a second kind of tension called psychological tension. And the tension will always resolve either in the direction of what you'd love to create or in the direction of soothing and calming your psychological tension. So what does that mean? Well, what that means, psychological tension, creative tension is the inspiration about, oh this is what I'm going to create. Like I've connected to my spirit. Wow, I'm going for the gold medal, right? Psychological tension is set up because you don't have the gold medal. You don't know how to get the gold medal. Everyone's telling you that you can't get the gold medal, including your healthcare team. And you want the gold medal now. You don't know how long it's going to take. And so that creates psychological tension. It creates fear. It creates grief because you don't have it. It brings up a lot of stuff. So now, when you do what you've always done, the patterns that we have to soothe our psychological tension, you avoid the feelings, you sweep it under the carpet, you withdraw, you distract yourself, you're resolving the psychological tension, the stuff, you're doing the thing that's most familiar to you. And when you resolve the psychological tension, you decrease the creative tension, which means you're less motivated to take the steps that are going to create the healing. Whereas if you can recognize, oh my God, okay, this is the psychological tension and it feels crap and I don't like it, but you know what? I'm not going to resolve it. Instead, I'm going to connect to my vision and I'm going to get my guidance to show me what my next step is. And I'm going to trust that when I take the next step, I'll get the next step. And when I take it, then I don't know what the big picture is. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like. And I don't know how long it's going to take. But I'm going to just take one step at a time. When you choose to do that and you don't soothe the psychological tension, that's when you start taking steps in the direction of what you would love to create. In this case, your healing. So this psychological tension is why Antoinette and I have been banging on in so many episodes about why it's important that you uncover the unconscious beliefs that are driving you. You uncover the unconscious patterns. You resolve the unresolved trauma. You do the reparenting of yourself. You learn to feel your feelings instead of suppressing them, and you make different choices. You recognize what your coping mechanisms are. And when you see yourself doing them, you go, hold on a second, this means my focus is on what I've always gotten, and this is not what I want. And I'm going to choose to do something different. I'm going to use my will to do something different. The reason why we've been going on about that is because the more you do that, the easier it becomes for you to hold the psychological tension without trying to resolve it. So let me give you another example. Imagine you're on a weight loss diet, right? And so you have a vision. You have a vision, but it's not just 10 kilograms. You have a vision for your health and your future beyond the 10 kilograms. Vision, you're at your current reality, 10 kilograms overweight, all right? The psychological tension is, what if this doesn't work? Everything else has never worked before. I keep on regaining the weight, whatever. I'm fat, I'm ugly, whatever that means for you, right? That's the psychological tension. But now, so you have a craving. Now, in the past, when you've craved chocolate, what you've done is you've just devoured the chocolate and then thought, oh, I've broken my diet. I might as well just eat everything I want to today and then I'll start again tomorrow. I mean, who hasn't done that? I've done it hundreds of times. That's soothing the psychological tension. But when you crave the chocolate and you recognize that you crave the chocolate because you're actually anxious or you have unprocessed emotion or something has happened that's triggered you today, and you choose to deal with that, and maybe you still choose to eat 2 blocks of the chocolate. You only eat 2 blocks instead of eating 2 slabs, or you actually don't eat the chocolate at all. Now, listen, this is not about whether you eat the chocolate or don't eat the chocolate. This is about, are you taking action that is soothing your psychological tension, short-term gratification, instant gratification, or are you holding off for your long-term creation? And this is also why it's really important. It brings me to another step. You can't just have what we call a positive vision, a negative vision. A negative vision means you just imagine the opposite of what you've got. Like, if you've got sickness and pain and discomfort now, then you just imagine like a complete healing. That's not always a true vision. All right. That's what is known, it can be known as a negative vision, because essentially you're now trying to fool yourself that the positive opposite is what you're after. And so what I mean by this is, yes, of course, healing is what you're after, but it's like, what's beyond that? What is it that you want more than that? Okay. What is the feeling of the life you're wanting to create? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to feel when you're healthy? What are you going to do and how's that going to make you feel? That's what you're after. And sometimes that doesn't look anything like the opposite of being ill. So that's why we can't just go, okay, well, I feel X, Y, and Z now, so I'm gonna go for the opposite of this. Like, I feel like I've got no confidence and I feel hopeless and I feel despairing. So I'm just gonna have a vision of me being like joyful and optimistic and da-da-da-da. That's what we call a negative vision. Okay, that's trying to create a vision from your ego or from your lower mind. You want to connect to the truth of your spirit. And there are ways to do that. There's a very structured, easy way that I teach my clients to do this. It's really not rocket science, okay? And yes, in the beginning, when you're fearful and you've just got your diagnosis and you're scared, you may have to do some emotional regulation first. You may need to get your nervous system calmed down. You may need to do a couple of things to get you into enough shape that you can actually do that connection. But what I'm trying to tell you is, it doesn't have to take 6 months. It doesn't even have to take 6 days. You can connect to the vision of your health if you come completely cold, like the lady who ended up doing the chemo. I think it took 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. I can't remember, but like 90 minutes to 120 minutes. And she had a vision and she had her next step. She didn't have the answers. She just had her next step. And after that, she started working more on uncovering the unconscious agendas, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So it's really vital that we have both poles and that we have both poles active at all times. So how do we do this? Well, we regulate our nervous systems. So how do you, if you've got fear and like the lady who came to me, she was fearful, she was uncertain, she didn't know what she wanted to do. So we spent some time doing some exercises that help to regulate her nervous system, get her into a state of calm right now so that she could have clarity. And because she could have clarity, she could have insights. And you know what? Soon after the session, she probably had a whole lot of doubts and fears. It's okay. You only need to have yourself in a nervous system state, shall we say, that helps you to connect for a short period of time. It takes 5 minutes to connect to your spirit once you start knowing how to do this. Okay. So the bridge between your reality of your lower mind, your fears and doubts, and the vision of your higher mind, your spirit, what you'd love to create, is the bridge is regulating your nervous system. And that's also why we've spoken about that so often in these episodes. So any of the somatic practices, belly breathing, humming, chanting, dancing, exercise, static back. Antoinette did an excellent episode on static back, episode 15. It really is an amazing exercise, right? Repetitive rhythmical movement like walking or swimming or running or dancing, box breathing. There are all sorts of beautiful somatic exercises that, these days with the internet, we can get them just about everywhere, right? What you need is a definition of your current reality, what's really going on for you right now. Honestly, what's really going on for you right now. You need a vision for what it is that you'd love to create. And then you need to get your nervous system, or maybe before you've got the vision, you need to regulate your nervous system, connect to the vision. Once you've got that vision and you've got the feeling associated with the vision, then you have to, ideally, at least once a day, you need to commit to choosing that vision no matter what. And no matter what means letting what needs to come in, and letting what needs to go out. And that can sometimes be terrifying. But when you choose that vision, you've set up the tension. And so when you notice that your focus is back in your normal limitations, and you notice that by noticing your coping strategies, now you're cultivating your awareness around this. When you notice that, you can do some simple somatic practices to just regulate your nervous system, and then you can connect to your vision and you can shift your focus. And yes, I know I'm making this sound very simple, and it actually is. You know what the most difficult part of this is actually doing it, is getting it scheduled so that you actually take the action. Because unfortunately, your ego is going to put up all sorts of barriers to you doing it, because your ego doesn't want anything to change. It wants things to stay the same. So the reason why this is so important to me to tell you is because just like we can bypass our current reality, we don't feel our unfelt emotions because that's ick, and we don't want to do it. We don't want to deal with we go, no, I don't want to deal with my trauma. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Don't want to revisit it, right? I don't want to feel unresolved emotions. I don't want to feel negative emotions. I don't want to increase my awareness. I don't want to have to work at this, right? That's the one side. So we do all the positive things and the love and light things because that's easier. We can also get stuck in doing all that shadow work, unconscious work. We can get really stuck in the reality of that. And what that does is it drags us down because we don't have anything in the future pulling us forward. So what I really want to get across is we need to work on both sides at the same time. Because when you have that vision, it pulls you into the future. When you have your current reality, it helps to propel you out of your current. And it helps to get the two to meet up. And when the two meet up, that's when healing happens. In fact, it starts happening all the way along. It doesn't really happen here, right? Here, when it meets up, that's when your scans are clear, when you are in remission, when you are disease-free, or when you have integrated all your parts and you've done what you needed to do and you realize, actually, you know what, your life is fulfilled and it's done, and you die in a beautiful, peaceful way. So visions are accessed through imagination. Everyone has an imagination. Everyone has a heart, is another creative premise, and which means we all have longings that we would love to express. And those longings are beyond, like, I want to have enough money. It's like, why do you want the money? Why do you want the health? What do you want it for? What do you want to experience? What do you want to express? What do you still want to do in this world? We all have those longings, no matter who we are, no matter how much work we've done or haven't done, which is, we can all access them because we all have an imagination. And I want to end off by saying that when you set that creative tension in, when you have both sides, when you've connected the negative terminal and the positive terminal of that battery, equal and opposite charges, that's when your intuition starts firing to guide you on what the next step is for you. So what is the right food for you to eat? What is the right treatment protocol for you to adapt? What is the right person for you to work with? That's how you become your own healer, because you become the regulator. You get to choose. You get to choose how you create your healing, and you get to choose who you get to help you create your healing. So please, the healers, you doesn't mean that you create it all on your own and you're on your own and you're just going to do it on your own. No, that's what people like me are, and hundreds of other coaches and doctors and healers are there for, right? We are there to help to guide you so that you can actually do that on your own. And this is why it's really important when you are choosing to work with someone, it's really important that that person holds the vision for your end result. It's very important that that person can connect to that vision, because I can be certain of your ability to heal, even if you're not certain. And that people underestimate the power of that, because that also helps to pull you into the future. So I hope that you have found that helpful. I hope that it made sense. I'd love to get your feedback. If you want to learn how to uncover your current reality, uncover those unconscious programs that are keeping you sick, if you want to learn how to connect to your vision, if you want to set up that creative tension and start becoming your own healer, I would, of course, love to help you do that. You can get hold of me. My email address is in the show notes. If you like this episode, please listen to some of the others. We would love it if you would follow our podcast and share the links with your friends also. I think I've asked you to do a lot of things now. So, you have options. You can choose which one you'd like to do. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.